readers, how are you today? Happy Monday. Today I'm going to read you a story called After the Fall, written and illustrated by Dan Santant. Now, way back at the beginning of the school year, I had introduced a different author illustrator to each grade level, and throughout the school year we were going to go back and revisit that author illustrator to learn more about him. So since we can't be at school right now, I wanted to share a little bit about Dan Santant with all of the 5th graders and then all of you also. He was the author that the 5th grade was learning about. He has won the Caldecott Medal before. He won it for the story of Beagle, the Unimaginary Friend, which most of you have heard me read before. It's one of my favorite books. I really like this author illustrator, Dan Santant. He does a combination of humorous stories, and he does sometimes a little bit of a story with a more serious tone, which is what this book is going to have. Dan Santant is predominantly or mostly a picture book author, but he also has written some graphic novels, and he has illustrated the covers of different chapter books. So if we were in our library, we would be able to find him in all sections of the library: the picture book section, the chapter book section, the graphic novel section. And some 5th graders may remember that he had illustrated a book of poetry that I had also shared with you at the beginning of the year, and they were very funny poems. After the Fall is a story of Humpty Dumpty. And Humpty Dumpty, a lot of you are going to know it as the nursery rhyme that all of us learned when we were young. This is kind of a continuation of what happens to Humpty Dumpty after he falls off of the wall. Now, Dan Santant was inspired to write this story because his wife was going through a very difficult time. She had something that we would call depression, and more specifically, it was called postpartum depression, which meant that she got very sad after the birth of her child. It wasn't something that she could help. It was something internally that was going on with her hormones, but it made life really, really hard for her. And it took a lot of courage and a lot of time for her to be able to overcome this depression that she was having. So I kind of thought that this was a good book to share with you because right now some of us might be feeling sad every once in a while. This is a very different time for all of us. Mrs. Davis loves to be at home. But it is difficult for Mrs. Davis some days too. Some days I wish that I could just go to school and see my friends, or I wish that I could go out and have dinner with my husband, or go to the mall and go shopping, something like that. But we just can't do that right now. And so sometimes we have to find a little bit of courage on the inside of us to help us get through this time. So Dan Santant was inspired by his wife because she was able to pick up the pieces after her fall, and I am hoping to inspire some of you if you are feeling a little sad today. So it's called After the Fall, How Humpty Dumpty Got Back Up Again. And one thing that I really like about this book that I hope that you can notice as I read is that the illustrations in the beginning of the book are very dark in color, and then as the story progresses, the illustrations are going to become more light, and that is an overall feeling of the story of what is occurring with Humpty Dumpty. After the Fall, How Humpty Dumpty Got Back Up Again, a story by Dan Santant. My name is Humpty Dumpty. This was my favorite spot, high up on the wall. I know, it's an odd place for an egg to be, but I loved being close to the birds. Then one day, I fell. I'm sort of famous for that part. Folks call it the Great Fall, which sounds a little grand. It was just an accident, but it changed my life. Fortunately, all the king's men managed to put me back together. Well, most of me. There were some parts that couldn't be healed with bandages and glue. After that day, I became afraid of heights. I was so scared that it kept me from enjoying some of my favorite things. Now I think this page is super funny because all of like the cereals that are on the top of the shelf at the grocery store are like all of your famous cereals that lots of kids would like. And then on the bottom of the shelf, we have Fiber Flakes, Flax, Twigs and Berries, Cardboard. Kind of funny that he thought to put the yucky cereals at the bottom. I walked past the wall every day, and I would think about climbing that ladder again. I really missed the birds and being high above the city, but I could never do it because I knew that accidents can happen. I eventually settled for watching the birds from the ground. It wasn't the same, but it was better than nothing. Then one day, an idea flew by. Making planes was harder than I thought. It was easy to get cuts and scratches, but day after day, I kept trying and trying until I got it just right. My plane was perfect and it flew like nothing could stop it. I hadn't felt happy in a long time. It wasn't the same as being up in the sky with the birds, but it was close enough. Unfortunately, accidents happen. They always do. I almost walked away again, but then I thought about all the time I'd spent working on my plane and all the other things I'd missed. I decided I was going to climb that wall. But the higher I got, the more nervous I felt. I didn't want to admit it. I was terrified. I didn't look up. I didn't look down. I just kept climbing, one step at a time, until I was no longer afraid. Maybe now you won't think of me as that egg who was famous for falling. Hopefully you'll remember me as the egg who got back up. And learned how to fly. And the story again is called After the Fall, How Humpty Dumpty Got Back Up Again. And I love his message on the back of the book. It says, life begins when you get back up. So, boys and girls, there are going to be days when all of us are feeling a little sad. There might be days when your parents are feeling sad, or your brothers and sisters. And you just have to remember that we will get through this. Things will get back to normal. And try to focus, when you're feeling sad, on the things that make you feel good. Mrs. Davis, sometimes when she feels sad, being outside makes me feel a lot better. So I will put my shoes on, I'll get the dog's leashes and collars, and we will go out and we will go for a walk, and we'll notice the birds singing and the leaves that are blooming and the flowers that are popping up. Yesterday, for the first time, I saw 2 turtles in my neighborhood. So that was kind of exciting. We just have to focus on the little things that can make us feel better. Oh, and here was a really bonus. On Saturday, it was the first day that Mrs. Davis got to have New Jersey strawberries because they are the best. So that was also another positive thing. So this is a picture of Dan Santant when he was a little boy. And he now has 2 children, and he lives in New York City where he writes and illustrates books. So you can always find his books at the library. You can find his books on Amazon or at a bookstore if you enjoyed this story. He does have a lot of book trailers out there for some other books that he has written. I think he's a really good author and illustrator, and I hope you enjoyed this story. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.